This is Matena at Plutonic Plains, and today I'm doing Gateway 60. And this will be released for Friday, November, I think, 16th. This is coming right off of Gateway 61. And to really generalize, it could be said that Gate 60 is the gate of light, Gate 61 is the gate of light, and then in contrast, Gate 60 is the gate of darkness. And I'll be going through why I would describe it as such. And it's interesting, this last year Pluto finally made its move since about a year ago, in January 2025, into Gate 41. And the year prior it was in Gate 60, and the gate prior to that, Gate 61. So Pluto went through a kind of transmutation, going through initially the gate of light and then the gate of darkness. And I could do a video on that maybe at some point, summarizing each of the gates that Pluto went through in the last 5-6 years. Because it's real interesting, because Pluto now is in Gate 41, which will start the frequency shift that will occur next week when the Sun goes into the 41 to meet Pluto, and all the other planets follow suit, either before or after. And then Pluto comes to Cazimi, the Sun. And this will be next week, so it'll be really interesting next week when I do Gate 41. But for now, I'm doing Gate 60, and last week I did 61. 61 is about habitual kind of patterns and structures that can be interrupted by inspiration, and thus, bringing light to beingness. Whereas Gate 60 is about structures. And I hope I'm sharing the image. I'm going to share it for sure now. So the image that you see here, this is for January 16th. And you can see here, looking at the human design body graph, you can see my cursor go down and look for Gate 60. And you can see that's the Sun's placement, and Venus is there already, and Mars is still in Gate 61, and so is Mercury. And Pluto is in Gate 41, line 2. So we have all these gates being occupied, and Saturn has retrograded into 36, which is causing a lot of emotional transmutation. And the Sun is exalted in 60, and so that's a really powerful kind of force that we will be able to utilize this next week, starting on Friday. And for Australia, it'd be a day before Thursday to us. And there are no channels. Oh, there is the 4037, the tribal channel, the communal channel. The 4037 is in operation, which means there will be an emotional wave, and those without defined ego or defined solar plexus could feel that kind of wave occurring and happening. How long it will be going on for? Well, the South Node's in Gate 40, and so that'll be a little while. And then Gate 37 is where the North Node is. So it's where the nodes are right now, prior to its shift into Aquarius and Leo mid-year. So we're still looking at the Pisces or Virgo balance, with the North Node in Pisces and the South Node in Virgo, meaning that the answer is not in our mind right now. The Neptunian veil is present, and we cannot look beyond the veil right now. It's not the time for that. We have to use our intuition and our personal authority, whatever that is, because it's very rare to have mental authority. Those are just the mental projectors. No one else really has mental authority. Everyone else goes by their will, their gut, their spontaneous intuition, their feeling clarity comes from the solar plexus, or their awareness. Which is self-directed authority from the G center, which is not awareness, it's just more subtle, just a more subtle shift in voice than awareness and expression. And so what we're looking at for this week with the Sun in gate 60, line 1, and this will be prior to next week when the Sun goes in the 41 to meet Pluto. And some of the other planets will start to progress in that direction this week. And so this particular gate is described, I'm not going to go over Ra's description today, mostly because I'm not at home and I didn't bring that book. But Chaitan does note that this particular gate is about prescribing boundaries and limits in order to provide a launching foundation or a springboard for advancement. So it's the need for boundaries and limitations in order to create something out of that. No, the channel in itself, the line 3, or gate 3, gateway 3, is about utilizing the ability to bring order to chaos. Gateway 3 is very chaotic, and so it's about bringing order. And so together this channel is a very unique, individuated channel, this gate of mutation, the 360. It's a channel about bringing forth a lot of powerful mutation and growth and expansion from structured limitations. And it's also very little timing on when that occurs. It's just something that's like a force. These channels here, all these 3 particular channels here, the 4253, the 360, and the 952, these are channels that are, they overlay the entire vehicle. So everything gets overlaid with one of these little 3 channels, if you have one of these complete channels. If you have the 4253, then everything has a beginning, middle, and an end. And then it begins again. If you have the 360, you have a very unique way of manifesting, one in which you're not always even fully in control of yourself. If you have the 952, you can, utilizing the energy in its highest frequency, you can have focus and be able to stay still and have that focus. And so what we're looking at with gate 60, with the Sun in gate 60, I have my image in front of it. Let me move it. So what we're looking at for this week is being aware of the structures in our lives. And life itself needs structure. And we humans, we provide structure, or structure's been provided for us, either way. And all these structures that we have many structures. We have systems. We have economic systems. We have religious systems. We have operative systems like money. We have systems like structures like the body. The body is in itself a structure, a system. We have the earth that we live on. We have books, religious books, that are structures that give guidance. But at the same time, they're already structured, so their guidance is more of just an outmoded, antiquated structure, either of energy, belief, utilized for control, homogeneity, rigidity. Structures is what gate 60 stands for in its lowest vibration. In a way, it represents form over spirit, or form without spirit. Form subject to time itself, which eventually dissolves all structure. But this is an impulse. This particular gateway is a Saturnian kind of impulse. It's an impulse to stay still, to not progress any further, but to have a structure. And thus its highest representation of structure is laws and legislation implementations, and the red tape that goes along with limiting growth and providing the challenge and difficulty of changing things beyond the existing laws. And these laws are like that humans create. These structures become like boxes that we live in. And the more laws, the smaller the box gets, and the more kind of isolated or subject to limitations we begin to feel. And these laws that kind of, hide us or like force us to be boxed in so extremely. These laws can be anything. They can be social, they can be moral, they can be religious, they can be economic. And so we have all these structures. And so this gateway represents limitation itself, de-evolution itself. It's something that does not yield to outward forces. All it can do is kind of wait for time. And thus it can act as a catalyzation for a type of death. We see this in people that don't grow. They just kind of dissolve in their life over a period of time. People that are stuck, people that are rigid, that don't want to grow in any way. They're missing the other half of this gate, the higher frequency expression, which is, of course, to realize that form needs spirit. And the higher frequencies beyond limitation in this gateway is realism, which is the talent usually that people with gateway 60 have, is they have a power to be really realistic about things. And then the city power is justice, but the city powers are so rare, they're not even really worth talking about. It's only very few humans that can kind of reach that level of expression. And the term justice really doesn't do it it's not very accurate. So what we have in this particular, give me a sec, I'm going to put a light. So what we have in this gate is we do have an expression of a gateway that does express darkness. And that darkness represents the lack of spirit in form. Now we need form. We live in bodies. So we live with our bodies, and then we live with extensions that other bodies, other structures that we need to kind of house spirit and energy in order to live in this realm. And this gate symbolizes darkness because it's in its lowest frequency. It's just a material principle and nothing beyond that. And so when Pluto went through this particular gate, Pluto was destroying all inauthentic structures and only vitalizing structures have been able to survive this transit of Pluto through gate 60. And so you see many structures started to fail. And so that's why we have this whole transition towards a new kind of economy, new digital world. But that's only one expression. We're obviously going too far into the extreme if we think now we should only have digitization. What do you do in an emergency when everything is digital and electricity doesn't work? What do you do? But what do you do in an emergency when you have physical dollars? You still can use physical dollars. So this extreme imbalance in modern society to put all the money on one ticket, this whole kind of lotto philosophical frame of life, or playing roulette and putting all the money on one number. I recently played roulette in Vegas and won consistently because I would just rapidly, intuitively pick the numbers that just felt right. Just bam, bam, bam. And I wouldn't just pick one number. I'd pick 5 or 6. And then almost every other, it was like 1 out of 3 rounds or 1 out of 2 rounds, I would win. Because I spread out my numbers. I would at least pick 5 or 6 numbers. And so one of them usually would be correct. And so this lack of balance is represented in the lowest frequency of this gate. And so in order to move to a higher expression and representation, higher frequency that this particular gateway of the 60 can have, for those who have it, of course, is to get over this kind of prejudice against the new. Because in general, the 60 wants things to be the same. We have, for example, one of the best examples that Rudd had in Gene Keys on gate 60 was schools. The implementation and the creation of schools for children. Children being the youngest and the most creative and the most expressive of new ways. And so they created a rigid, controlled, homogeneous package called the military school system, because districts, that's a military term. That's where schools came from in the 19th century. They came from military districts once they started removing children from family farms and destroying that level of agriculture. And then so what you have is the opportunity to create this cultish conditioning for gate 60 for praising structures over innovation, over originality. And the gate 60 kind of represents this. It represents an abhorrence of the new and the different. I think Rudd described it as a nemesis of change and growth. And what we're looking at when this particular gate is shifted to a higher frequency is we're looking at, I'm forgetting the term, realism. Rudd said realism. He talked about how the archetype of 60, of Gateway 60, represents people who have a great talent for realism. In the common sense that in order for something to successfully manifest in the world, it must have a structure. And Rudd also talked about the repressed and the reactive expression of this gate. And he talked about it as being the repressed being a complete lack of structure. And, those who utilize this gate, who have activity in this gate, or activation rather, and this is a pressure. This is a pressure gate from the root center. You could see it here on the body graph. It's coming from the root center. And he talked about that those who don't utilize the structure of this gate, who choose to be unstructured, they don't seem able to commit things or to fully structure any part of their lives. And of course, the opposite extreme, the one I've more been talking about in terms of society and social structures, is rigidity and the control of everything through anger, not allowing anything to be questioned, being beyond reproach. In other words, just having this kind of stranglehold on the moving parts of life. And, this is a very rigid position to have. Now, the solution, well, I don't know if it's a solution, but the higher frequency for this that Rod talked about in Gene Keys was the common sense of the magic of life. So the common sense that in order to manifest something in this world, you need a structure for it. And examples are like a river. A river, like it flows, but it flows in a bank, and the bank gives it direction. And then we also have seeds from nature, seeds we might eat, and they have hard shells to protect them. And just like human spirits, like we have these bodies to protect and to allow us to maneuver in this realm. And so the gift utilization of Gateway 60 is about balance. As most of the gateways in human design, we're looking at balancing energy. And in this case, we're looking at balancing youthfulness with wisdom, or structure with idealism. And so it's kind of a new law the law that, whenever we have something new that we're bringing into beingness, it must follow certain laws. In other words, it must be structured. We live in a carbon-based verse, at least presently, or at least the old overlay, if the new one is not crystalline or whatever that is. But new ideas and new implementations and innovations must come into this realm through a form of structure. They must be structured to be successful. So as usual with everything, it's about not losing perspective and realizing the capital B, balanced nature of life, and the necessity for that, which goes into what I always like to say, which is there are no great heights without corresponding depths. And so thus in life we don't necessarily seek extremes, like the extremes of love, the extremes of hate, but rather a balanced understanding. The word love is almost meaningless with its overutilization and uselessness and it being taken, just overused in film and art. But it still has meaning in the sense that it is the highest form of our expression as human beings. And we hope it still has meaning. That'll be evidenced in our actions as we transition to a new social world, especially in light of 2027, the cross of the sleeping phoenix. But what it is that it's important to understand that we have to be balanced about things in life in such a way that whatever we create, it must have a structure. We're still in this realm. Things must have their structure. If we take it to the highest frequency, representative in this gateway, then we have the city of justice. And this is about self-realization. And it's a shift, a mutation that negates all temporal and spatial reality. So it's like a self-realization, and it's a frequency shift. It's the ability to get to a place where there's no sense of space or time. It's kind of a transcendence past causality or karma in the sense of action and reaction. It's more of an acausal representation of reality, where there's not a before and after, there's just a beingness, a presence. And this, of course, makes possible for, what many practitioners in the East, or in the West, call the light body or the rainbow body. And this is what many have talked about, masters that appear and disappear. It's kind of like, you can think of it like Gandalf in Lord of the Rings, who's known to be a character who comes from some other space and time to help and support the Earth's destiny at that particular time and place. And so there are beings in humanity that do this, beings that come forth from the future, from the past, most likely from the future, as they're more evolved beings. And then they come and they bring the help or support that's needed at a particular time. And this is the last gate before 41, before the sun goes into 41. And I feel like on January 20th, 21st, once the sun gets into gate 41, we're going to have a huge shift. And that's going to be automatic, because that should be on a Sunday. That should be next Sunday, actually, because I know, well, not necessarily, but I know the Pluto moon, all the Hades moon for this month are on Sundays. So the transformations are occurring on Sundays. But for this week leading up into January 20th, which we'll all see how that week occurs, because we're all going to be feeling this strong energy in gate 41. And 41 is the gate of the imagination. It's the gate of wants and desires. But sometimes it's enough to just visualize or imagine things. We don't have to always experience them literally. And that's the power. That's the power of that particular gate. And Pluto will be purifying that area of our lives next week. But for this week, it's a couple of days now. This week will be about what are the structures in your life that are working. What are the structures in your life that are not working? What new structures can you create for your new ideas, for your new implementations? I know this is crossing my mind. I was talking with my Discord yesterday a little about what I'm thinking to do after all my descriptions of the 64 gates are complete. And that'll be probably in April, because I started this, I think, of April of last year. And so you guys know I'll probably create a playlist on my channel. I haven't done that. But now I'm starting to tell my clients that when they get a human design reading and they have particular important gates like their sun or their north node, I invite them to go on my channel and listen to those particular gates and see where you're at for fun. Where are you at in your frequency? Where can you see yourself shifting to? Because I go into a lot of detail usually in my expression of these gateways, in utilizing my readings and my own personal experience and what it is that these energies represent. Because these are energies that we all utilize. In a sense, we all have every single gateway. We do. It just may not be active consistently. But activations are occurring all the time. And whether they're ours or not ours, what does that mean? I mean, it means that if you have it in your human design graph, you have it consistently, 24/7 for the rest of your life. But you might not have the 3. But doesn't mean you won't get it in transit or feel it when it transits. So in a sense, we all have every gate. We all feel every activation. And so even if you don't have this gate, being aware of it, I feel is important. I myself do not have this gate. And see if you can feel into it this week. What are the limitations in your life right now? What are the limitations that no longer need to be there? What are some new ideas you can bring in, and what are those structures that you can bring in for these new ideas so that they can be implemented and manifested into this realm. And that's what it is. This is Gateway 60. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks for listening, and tune in for next week when I do the sun transiting into Gate 41, which is going to be really exciting, as that's the whole period of January 20th to the 27th I've been talking about, and how every planet's going to go through the underworld, and Pluto's going to meet with the sun. There'll be a Kazemi, and the spirit of Pluto will create a shadow world for us during that period of time, which I'll be talking about the exact date next week when I go over it, but it'll be around January 21st, 2nd, or 3rd. Be right around there. And I feel like it's going to be a big week with a lot of legislative announcements and perhaps some flexes of war, with Mars being very strong, and it's making multiple aspects during this kind of Plutonized Pluto, all the planets going through Pluto. Mars is going to be making a lot of aspects next week as well. So I'll go over that next week. Hope you guys enjoyed, and take care.